joining us. Today, we have another interesting topic. We are going to segue into criminal law and talk a little bit about plea deals. Okay. And so today's topic, this video will be discussing plea deals. Okay. As always, quick introduction. My name is Genghis Shakhan. I'm the managing attorney here at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. It's a pleasure to meet you. If you're here joining us for the first time, make sure that you like and follow so you can always tap in with us and get everything criminal as well as family law, divorce, as well as men's rights. All right. So as I discussed, I'm the managing attorney. My partner, Attorney Wilkerson, she is part of the tandem. We are a boutique law firm with two lawyers that take on, we're a smaller firm, so we take on cases where we actually get to know our clients very intimately. And that's really important to us, right? Not like the big firms where you're going to be just a number. If you are interested in a consultation before we get started, you're welcome to go to the link in our bio. Also, you can always give us a call if you're interested in a consultation. If you are thinking about retaining counsel, our telephone number is 478-845-1213. We also have 404-999-9529. Give us a call at either number. Our receptionist will be more than happy to get you to one of the attorneys, and we will be more than happy to do a same day consultation with you. We're pretty good at getting back to folk, either via telephone or by email. All right, so as I promised, today's topic is going to be on plea deals. If you're here, one of the things that you may be considering if you do have a criminal case is whether or not you should take a plea deal. Maybe there's a plea deal on the table and you're really grappling with the idea of whether or not this is something that you and your family should be considering. So, this is what every kind of criminal defendant needs to know before making a life changing decision regarding that plea deal. Okay. And I will say, opening up, that is one of the most common questions that we get from our criminal defense clients. And that's going to be whether or not they should take a plea deal if there is a plea deal actually on the table. And the answer is always not very simple. It can a plea deal. It's a double-edged sword, right? It can save you years of heartache and uncertainty. At the same time, it can be one of the biggest and one of the most damaging, really, decisions that you can make in terms of really wrecking your life. It just depends on the deal, depends on what's on the table, depends on the evidence, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So before we get started, at the outset, I do want to say this is for educational purposes only. By watching this video, it does not establish an attorney-client relationship between you as well as our attorneys here at the Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. Any information that you're given is simply, again, for educational purposes only, and should not be acted upon. Okay. As always, if you have a criminal case or you have a family law case, it's going to be best that you consult with an attorney. And if you are looking to essentially get some representation, then it's going to be important that you vet an attorney's office as well as those lawyers to make certain that you're getting a person that's a good fit for you. Okay. All right. So today we're going to cover a few things in regards to pleas. We're going to talk a little bit about what an actual plea deal is why prosecutors actually offer them, the advantages and disadvantages, and then of course some of the factors to consider and when a plea might actually make sense for you and your family. And when a trial might actually be a better option. Okay. So let's jump right in. What is a plea deal? It's pretty simple. Most people, if you watch Law and Order, if you watch CSI, if you watch Matlock or Goliath or any of those shows, you've probably seen your fair share of plea deals. They're basically an agreement between the prosecution and the defendant. Okay, that's all of the plea deal is. It's an agreement between these two parties, the prosecutor and the defendant, and of course, the counsel for the defense counsel will help facilitate that plea deal if they do have counsel. The other party of the defendant has counsel. Okay, and so usually the defendant agrees to either plead guilty or no contest in that type of situation where there is a plea deal being offered, and that's being offered in exchange for either reduced charges, a reduced punishment, or it can be actual dismissal of all the charges. Okay, so those three things are usually what's on the table And so your guilty offer is going to be essentially in consideration for either, again, reduced charges, dismissal of those charges, or reduced punishment. Or it can be a sentencing recommendation. That's the other thing. Okay. Basically, the prosecutor can recommend a sentence in exchange for your guilty plea. Okay. So those are the four things, I should say, that are usually on the table and are being considered when a plea deal is being actually offered by a prosecutor. So let's talk about why prosecutors actually offer plea deals. Okay, and so it is beneficial sometimes for the prosecution as well as for the defense, and usually one of the biggest reasons is time. Okay, so trials take time. They take resources. Okay, and really just depending on how big that district attorney's office is, depending on how busy that jurisdiction or that circuit is going to be a determining factor in whether or not the prosecutor, whether that's the district attorney or the assistant district attorney, and I'm just talking more specifically about felony cases, whether or not, and it can be a solicitor, whether or not they want to invest the time in taking your case to court, okay, and going through that process of vetting a jury, and whether or not that office has the resources and the people power to actually do that and to do it well. All right, and so time is a big deal, and trials require witnesses, police officers, experts, as well as court resources. All right, and we talked a little bit about the resources component. So all of those things, the prosecution is taken into consideration, and so it benefits the state in a few ways. They save money, they reduce the risk of essentially a not guilty verdict, right? You don't want to invest all that time and money into a case only for you to come back and get a not guilty verdict. It comes off as being wasteful. And then it clears court calendars, which judges usually like, right? Because those dockets get really, really busy, really, really full. And so sometimes, in order to move those cases along, you may see prosecutors entering into plea deals. All right. So, but an important point to note is that that deal being offered doesn't necessarily mean it's a sign that the state's case is weak against you. Okay. And sometimes, people are a little confused that there's a plea offer on the table. It's because your case is weak, and that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's the case. It's not always the case. Okay. So do keep that in mind. And so let's go ahead and talk about some of the biggest misconceptions of if a plea deal is actually on the table, or if you've been offered a plea deal. That you believe that the party, the defendant, believes that the case may be weak against them, because that's not always the situation. Sometimes the evidence is overwhelming, and sometimes the state simply wants some certainty. Okay, and so that's that. Sometimes it's a matter of juries can be wildly different. All right. And so one jury can see, the facts, hear the law, and they can bring back a guilty verdict. Another jury on the same facts, same law, can bring back a not guilty verdict, right? And so sometimes it's just a matter of certainty. And that can be the motive for a plea offer. And sometimes the case is weak, right? The evidence is weak in the case. All right, and that's just something that the prosecution takes into consideration, and or sometimes the prosecutor just might want to avoid trial. All right, and or because the case is weak, they don't want to take it to trial because they know it's a loser. All right, and then it's a bad investment of they're not going to get a big return on their investment of time. And so, every case is different. So sometimes, again, you can have a strong case. The state can have a strong case against you. And again, and just the factors and the variables, regarding resources and time, might, really motivate a prosecutor to say, hey, you know what? Given these charges, given, I have a lot, bigger fish to fry. I have other felony cases that are more important than this one. I'll go ahead and enter into a plea deal on this, right? I mean, and then sometimes again, the evidence is just that weak. Okay, they don't have a really strong case, and so they may go forward with actually entering into a plea. All right. So, but every case is different. It's important to note that because this is not cookie cutter stuff. Judges are different, prosecutors are different, jurisdictions are different. Again, the facts are always different. The law is different, and so you have to keep that in mind when it comes to your case. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of a plea deal, because there are some. One, you can get reduced charges if that's on the table for you. So you can see something like a felony reduced to a misdemeanor. All right, and obviously there are benefits that come with that. You can be reduced sentencing exposure. That's going to be important, right? You're going to talk about less jail time or less prison time, and then or less probation. All right, you get some certainty. All right, so you know the outcome and there's no jury risk. Right, so you don't. Again, sometimes a jury will come back, and they'll say they'll return a guilty verdict, right? And that's something that you have to really be thoughtful of, because you just don't know. Even if the facts may be in your favor, or you feel like they're in your favor, it doesn't mean that a jury is going to agree with you, right? It gives you a faster resolution. Anyone that knows anything about these criminal cases, or even about superior court, if we're talking about felony cases, they move a little slow. Okay, so your case can wind through the system and take years before you actually stand before you're up for trial. Okay, you're on the trial calendar. You get a faster resolution, which can be important to some clients. Again, if you have certain kind of career opportunities, that might be important, to get this thing resolved as quickly as possible. And then it just reduces stress. Okay, it gives you less time spent waiting for trial, because again, it gives you the certainty of having it really done, and having it done in a fast and expedient way. All right, so let's talk about some of the risk of a plea deal, because this is a serious stuff, especially if you're convicted of capital felony or serious felony. There might be some really big risks, and that we need to discuss here. And so one obviously is going to be permanent on your criminal. You have a permanent criminal record, and that can have effects and impact you in other ways. And we'll talk about how that might impact you, and impact your life and your family's life. A conviction obviously is going to follow you for years. Okay. If you are at your immigration status, right, there can be immigration consequences. Okay. And so if you are a non citizen, it can impact your standing in with immigration. All right. And that's really important. Employment consequences. So we represent a lot of service members, we represent a lot of teachers, we represent firefighters and police officers. And so one of the things that sometimes with some of these professions, some of these charges might impact whether or not you can remain employed or on the job. Okay. And so that's really important, that sometimes, and depending on what it is that you do professionally, that this gets wrapped up and resolved in a way that may help you maybe continue to be gainfully employed in your chosen profession. All right, there are going to be some firearm restrictions possibly. Okay, and so certain convictions can affect your gun rights, and then future sentencing. So a conviction today may increase penalties later. All right, and so those are all the risks of a plea deal, by either saying that you are guilty, or even if you plead no contest. Of course, if you're convicted, not convicted, but you're entering into this plea deal, it can have adverse effects in those areas of your life. So important to kind of keep that in mind. So here are some of the questions that you need to be asking before accepting a plea deal. Okay, and that's one of them is going to be, how strong is the evidence, right? And so witnesses are usually, that's one of the big ways that the state's going to use to prove their case, is they're going to probably bring in some witnesses, and so if those witnesses have made statements. Maybe they've made statements that are have been memorialized in audio or in video. That can obviously might move against you, right? If you are a defendant in the case, and there are eyewitnesses. Okay, video, right? DNA. So things like flock cameras, things like ring cameras, those things pick up stuff. Things like video cameras, audio, right? That kind of stuff is going to be fairly damning, right? And so a lot of this is unearthed and uncovered in discovery. So sometimes, as soon as that defense attorney gets that discovery dump, we can make a determination of how strong the state's case might be against you. If there's DNA evidence, if there's a confession, right? If you've made certain statements, sometimes we don't find out about those statements until later. For whatever reason, sometimes defendants forget that they have made certain statements to officers, and it comes back, to kind of haunt us. But if there are statements or confessions that have been made, again, it's going to make the state's case that much stronger. And so those are things that you do want to take into consideration, questions to ask before accepting the plea deal. Some other questions you want to think about are, what are your chances at trial? All right. And so you want to be realistic. You don't want to live in a fantasy world. I understand what you may hope for, but it's important to be realistic and to not be emotional about this, right? Because the stakes are so high. And so another question you want to ask is what you are giving up. So by pleading guilty, you usually waive things like trial rights, confrontational rights. Your right to confront your accuser. And then, of course, sometimes certain appeal rights. Okay. And so, really, really important to understand what you may be giving up and entering into a plea deal. And the other part is what happens if you lose at trial. Okay. And so there's something that is known as a trial tax, okay, for losing at trial. And so you want to compare it to the potential plea offer that was already on the table, and you really want to give some real thought to your maximum exposure. If you lose at trial, what that can mean and what that can look like for you, in terms of what you might end up with as a sentence. Okay, and so a plea deal may make sense if the evidence against you is strong. Okay. And again, you have to make an intelligent, unemotional decision, and just really be objective about the evidence. If the state's case is solid and strong against you, you may want to consider a plea deal offer. And some of the things you might want to even ask for in exchange is, a reduction in charges, right? So the offer can dramatically improve your outcome, right? If there isn't a reduction, going to be a reduction in charges in exchange for you pleading guilty. Avoiding prison time, that might be a big one, right, to you, right? So instead of going to prison, if and losing at trial, you can enter into a plea, and then maybe avoid jail, avoid prison time. All right. And then protecting your family or career. So a plea might limit collateral damage in ways, right? And so again, when I think about, we talked about a reduction in charge from a felony to a misdemeanor. That might be helpful for you when it comes to your job, right, or the place that you're employed. And so here are some times when you might want to actually consider going to trial. Okay, and that's when the obvious one is when the evidence is weak against you. Okay, and so the state can't prove its case. They can't make its case, or your attorney could advise you that you feel like the state doesn't have a very strong case against you, or there might be some constitutional issues. Maybe there are illegal searches, right, or illegal seizures, or some improper statements. And something like that might actually derail the state's case, and that might be a good reason to try to fight your case in a trial. Or there's credibility issues with the witnesses, right? And so maybe the witnesses were paid informants, right? Or there could be issues with the officer, okay, and their credibility. So any of that type of stuff, it might make sense for you to go forward and move forward with trial, or you just might be innocent, right? We don't want to ever forget that some folks, they are innocent and maintain their innocence, and they have a viable defense. All right, maybe you have an alibi, okay, and maybe it was an act of self-defense, right? And so, and you are actually innocent. Those are reasons that you might want to take your case to trial. Okay. All right. So here are some common mistakes that we see people make when it comes to essentially either when it comes to plea deals and offers versus going forward with the trial, is that they're making emotional decisions in some instances. So fear is a very, very bad decision maker. You don't want to sometimes jump at and take the first offer that's on the table. So not every offer is the best offer, and it depends on the prosecutor that you're dealing with as well, right? So some prosecutors won't give you a second offer, okay? And so it's going to be good if your defense attorney has a relationship with the district attorney's office or the solicitor's office, and they can really gauge who they're dealing with, in terms of maybe an ADA, and if they like to play hardball, that's going to be essentially it's going to be good to go with probably somebody that's local, that really has their the can take the temperature of the ADA or the solicitor that they are dealing with. Ignoring long-term consequences is a big deal, right? So you want to think beyond today, all right? And so sometimes it's really difficult to project, but you do want to absolutely do that. Listen, if you're incarcerated, listening to other inmates, that's always a big one, right? And so those jailhouse lawyers, they seem so smart, right? They have been to court many times. They have gone to the law library. They've read up on the law, and they are advising you on how to proceed, right? And so quick and easy way to derail your case, right? Listening to those jailhouse lawyers, so other inmates, because you have to understand that every case is different. All right. Every case is different. All right. Taking advice from social media is always a no, right? So some people, they just, they'll jump on the social media, and, they will take some very bad advice. And so facts matter, the law matters. Applying those facts to the law is going to essentially going to help you make a determination of what direction you should probably go in, right? When you consider the evidence that's going to be used against you. Okay, so the role of your defense attorney is two or threefold. Their goal is, a good attorney is going to help you make this evaluation. They're going to really talk to you about the strengths and weaknesses of your case. They're going to talk to you about trial risk, plea risk, long-term consequences, and then all the available options. Okay, sometimes there's other options on the plate on the plate, other alternatives. And so those are things like pretrial diversion, or there's things like accountability court. That stuff is also out there, right? Drug court, for this stuff, sometimes things for military veterans. So it just depends on the jurisdiction, depends on what options might be out there for you. Of course, a lot of that is going to be contingent on what the charges are. Okay, and so that's something else to give some thought to. All right, so it's important to remember that these types of decisions are yours. They belong to you. They don't belong to the district attorney. They don't belong to your attorney or the judge. We could advise as attorneys. However, this decision ultimately is going to be yours, whether or not you're going to accept a plea offer, because you're going to be doing the time. Okay, so this is your decision to make, and so you never want to lose sight of that. Now, finally, I will just say to you, the question is not, do you want to take a plea offer? Because it seems like it's that simple. The question is which option is going to be best, considering the evidence, right? Considering the risks, and really considering your future. Okay, and sometimes that answer is going to be that it's going to be a plea deal, and sometimes the answer is going to be, hey, this is something that needs to go to trial. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're informed. You want to make sure that your counsel is helping you walk through this process, and that they are advising you as needed. Okay. All right. As always, if you have a criminal case and you need counsel, you are welcome to give us a call. We'd be more than happy to represent you. If we find that after a consultation that it is a good fit for you as well as our law firm, you can give us a call at 478-845-1213, or 404-999-9529. You can also go to the link in our bio to bring you to our website. We have a number of blogs where we talk about a lot of different topics, from criminal defense to family law to divorce, to men's rights. So go ahead and make sure that you make your way over there and kind of parse through all of that information. And if we can assist you and help us out, make sure you give us a call. All right, guys, make sure that you like and you follow. If this has been helpful, or if you know someone that has a criminal case and that is considering a plea offer, even if they have a criminal case, maybe this is something you want to forward along to them, to help, really get them abreast of what's happening in their case, if they haven't gotten to a stage yet where they are considering trial, or if they are considering a plea offer that is on the table. All right, make sure you like and you follow, and make sure that you go through the library of our other videos. We have a number of long form videos here on YouTube that are really, really helpful. All right, guys, thank you, and we'll see you on the next video.